Bush. Pete, I want to go back to, I hope you were listening into the beginning of the program and everything that we aired since, because a few moments ago we aired Donald Trump's comment that he sees America as a garbage can, and also Ronald Reagan's, shining city on the hill. I mean, that is a pretty startling contrast to go from the shining city on the hill, Reagan's view of America, and Donald Trump's.
It's a forgotten time in America, Jim, and a lot of voters who will be headed to the polls or who have voted already were not around for the days of Ronald Reagan, when leadership meant something very different than it means today. At least in Donald Trump's thinking, leadership is about being strong and projecting that strength all across the world. I think those comments, look, I've said this dozens of times on this network and elsewhere, I wish he did not speak like this. But this is Trump being Trump. This is Stephen Miller's dream. This is what he wants. He wants Trump to be authentically himself and to speak in a way that garners coverage and attention. And as was mentioned, fear is part of the closing argument of this campaign. But I would point out, fear is part of the closing argument for both campaigns. Trump is running on the fear of illegal immigration. Kamala Harris is running on the fear of Trump. And it's because fear motivates. Fear is how you get people to show up to the polls. And they're both trying to reach those low propensity voters who may show up because they're fearful of the alternative candidate winning.
And Pete, there's this stunning new polling out this morning from ABC showing just about half of the country, there it is right there, sees Donald Trump as a fascist. Less than half as many, 22%, say Kamala Harris is that way. That is pretty startling. Some of this polling was obviously done before the revelations coming from the former White House Chief of Staff, John Kelly, and the comments that he made. What do you make of that?
This country remains divided, equally split 50-50. That's why none of us knows when the election results will be available, because they could be incredibly close. They could be litigated. And again, why the campaigns are focusing on those low propensity voters, people who are not reliably Democrat, not reliably Republican. They need to get them to show up, because a literal handful of votes in a very small number of states is going to determine this, and those polling results reflect that.
And but I guess it's just a stunning number to see about half of Americans view Donald Trump in this fashion. You and I are fairly long in the tooth. We've been around, I've covered politics. You've been in politics. I don't recall there ever being a time where a major presidential candidate was viewed by half the country as a fascist. I mean, that is stunning.
Our rhetoric has increased. It's become more heated. It's become more volatile all across the spectrum. So I'm not trying to downplay the poll. Yeah. I'm just looking at it as this is an equally divided country. And I haven't seen any numbers recently, but I'm sure if you ask the question, is Kamala Harris a socialist, you'd probably get pretty darn close to 50%.
Yeah, well, we don't have that number available, so we can't really state that emphatically. But, you know, Pete, a lot of Trump's vitriol is about immigration. The former president pledged at that same rally to rid communities that he says have been invaded. Let's listen to that.
I will launch the largest deportation program in American history. We'll get them out. I will rescue every town across America that's been invaded and conquered. These towns have been conquered. And we will put these vicious and bloodthirsty criminals in jail, or we'll kick them the hell out of our country as fast as we can.
Yeah, Pete, I mean, Kristen was saying earlier, you know, some of this rhetoric worked for Donald Trump in 2016, but it didn't work in 2018. I covered those midterms. Didn't work for Trump in 2020. Didn't work in 2022. I mean, I hate to just break it down in terms of strategic terms, because obviously, I mean, there's a factual thing to deal with, and that communities have not been conquered. Obviously, that has not taken place. But I mean, do you think that this is an effective strategy, that this is going to work? It has not always worked for him.
Well, it does remind me of 2016 and the famous analysis that opponents of Trump took him literally but not seriously, and supporters took him seriously, but not literally. And if you look at the record, remember things that Donald Trump said during that campaign. He said that the United States would leave NATO. He said that he would eliminate the Department of Education. He said that he would appoint a special prosecutor to go after Hillary Clinton. None of those things happened. And that's why you've seen in recent polling, Latinos, for example, they don't believe his rhetoric on this. A lot of Americans think he's full of it when he stands behind a podium at a rally and says the things he says. And they look at the record of how the administration impacted their lives positively, and that's how they're casting their vote for him.
Yeah, but he did do a quote-unquote Muslim ban in the beginning of his administration. He did do a family separation policy during his administration. I mean, some things that he says out on the campaign trail, he does. He vowed to crack down on the press. He did do that. But Pete, I want to ask you, J.D. Vance, the vice presidential candidate, was at a town hall hosted by NewsNation last night. He was asked about his handling of the debunked claims that Haitian migrants were eating people's pets in Ohio. Let's listen to that.
Do I think that the media certainly got distracted on the housing crisis and the health crisis and the crisis in the public schools by focusing on the eating the dogs and the cats things? Yeah, I do. And do I wish that I had been better in that moment? Maybe. But it's also people in my community, people that I represent, are coming to me and saying this thing is happening. What am I supposed to do? Hang up the phone and tell them they're a liar because the media doesn't want me to talk about it?
I mean, that sounds like a walk back. It sounds like he's admitting that they're not doing that, finally admitting it, that they're not doing that in Springfield, Ohio.
Yeah, he obviously felt it was politically advantageous several weeks ago to not walk it back, but to now walk it back. And what you do when you receive news like that or reports such as that is you try to corroborate them. You know, in the news business, you try to get two sources that can tell you what happened or confirm a story for you. It doesn't seem like that was the case for J.D. Vance. He doesn't believe in double sourcing his news before speaking about it. But I do want to point out that on this very program a couple weeks ago, Jim, we talked about this issue right around the time Donald Trump said he was going to go to Springfield, Ohio, and he never did. That tells you a lot.
Yeah, we're still waiting to see if he's going to do that. All right, Pete Seat, we'll be watching for that. Good reminder. Thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you.